Hello everyone, we will commence the session shortly. Make yourself comfortable, grab a cup of tea, cup of coffee, glass of water, sit back and relax. We're in for a nice treat today. All right, let's get cracking. Kia ora and welcome everyone. My name is Giovanni Ferrante. I look after marketing operations for CIPS in the ANZ region, and it's a pleasure for me to be your host for today. It's going to be a really interesting session, and I hope you do get a lot out of it. The topic that we'll be discussing today is the power of technology in the supply chain. And we're basically going to go through how adopting technologies in procurement and supply chain management can dramatically improve your business operational efficiency, employee productivity, and customer experience as a whole. Before we get started, a few housekeeping. So the webinar is currently being recorded and will be made available to you all in the coming days. You will have an opportunity to interact both with the speakers and your peers joining us from all around the world through the chat box. You can also ask questions to the speakers through the Q&A box. And we encourage you to pick up brain today. We'll be sharing some cool stuff, and there'll be an opportunity to get some value out of this session. Before we get into the nitty-gritty and the key aspects of what we'll be talking about, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the many land indeed. I'm currently sitting on the land that belongs to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I would like to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and acknowledge their connection to the community, land and water. Now, about today's webinar, we've talked about the key topic. I want to spend a minute or so just to introducing the organization that are bringing this webinar to you today. So first and foremost, we have Yojee, and I'd like to thank the Yojee team for collaborating with us on this, webinar. Yojee is a cloud-based SaaS logistic platform that seamlessly manages, tracks, and optimizes freight movements along the entirety of the supply chain. Yojee's best-in-class logistics software uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to optimize and manage delivery operations on a mass scale. So the software incorporates a state-of-the-art technology and a powerful APIs, giving businesses the ability to pull parcel capacity off the Yojee grid to enable greater revenue, increased efficiency, and higher transparency. So Yojee helps and empowers small to medium organizations to achieve the cost efficiency that only industry giants have enjoyed before, and also works with large multinational organizations to help transition into today's digital world. The other organization that's bringing you the webinar today is CIPS. We've done many of those webinars, and then we always think it's important to acknowledge and put a reminder out there on who we are, who we stand for, and some of the things that we are trying to achieve. So CIPS is the largest professional body for people who work in procurement and supply management across the world. We have a community of over 200,000 practitioners. That's across 173 countries as of a few days ago, and that's incredible. There's such a large representation of our community with such a difference, but that's the beauty of our profession. We've got offices across 5 continents, and we've been around for about 100 years, so we're quite old. Quite old, but also quite refreshed. We've put a lot of effort into ensuring that we keep ourselves up to date And really what we're here for is to help the profession move forward, to support individuals progress in their career and learn more, and to help organizations set up better buying processes, ensure they have strategies, policies and governance to help their business have sustainable procurement and supply chain strategies. We're passionate about best practice, we're passionate about sustainability issues, we're passionate about technology, and this is why we've decided to collaborate with Yojee to bring you this webinar today. And we, like Yojee, we work with different size businesses, from small enterprises to, again, large corporation, across a variety of sectors, you know, from public to private and the non-for-profit as well. Now, enough chit chat. I think it's about time we get into the session. And at this stage, I'd like to welcome Nicholas Zabikow. He's the Executive Vice President of Global Sales and Marketing at Yojee. Nick has been with the business for a number of years, and welcome, Nick. He is a revenue-driven growth executive, a sales leader with experience and success in building, scaling, and leading sales organization within the information technology industry, as well as the supply chain, particularly enterprise and SaaS. Has delivered consistently over the years revenue growth and gross margin and EBIT performance. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I mentioned today a very high level overview of the topic. So what we want to get into a bit more details is how is the rate of technology adoption changing in today's day and age, how some of the trends that we've seen impacted the profession, and why is digitalization so important, and understanding a little bit about the barriers and some of the struggle their organization face while implementing such programs, how digitalization can help your business not only achieve efficiency and transparency, but drive growth, business growth. And then we'll have an opportunity to go into a bit of a Q&A. Thanks to all of those that have submitted questions in the registration process that have come through. And we have some really amazing things to discuss. So before I ask Nick to share his insight, I just want to quickly set the frame from some of the trends we've seen. CIPS has been collaborating with the University of Melbourne, one of the leading universities here in Australia and around the world, on a digitalization in procurement and supply project across the last 2 years. So we've surveyed 700 plus supply chain and procurement managers across the world twice within 2 years to capture some of the things that I've mentioned before. So understanding the trends, understanding the motivation that drive technology adoption through the business, some of the challenges and some of the outcome, as well as the benefit that implementing and adopting those technologies delivered. And some of the things that, you know, we find are quite interesting. So 97% of the people that we surveyed have had adopted at least one of the technologies. And we built that around a range of 11 technologies in 2019. We've added voice recognition last year, and this is across, you know, RFID, AI, cloud computing, and all of the above. So seeing that the adoption level is so high, or at least one of those technology, and about 60% had more than one. So it's really telling us where we're heading as an industry. 95%, and this is a stat that came from another survey, the Salary Guide survey, individuals believe, 90% of the individuals that we surveyed believe that technology is an enabler. And I suspect that this 5% that didn't agree with that statement will either rethink that very soon or probably be out of job. Some of the biggest driver for the motivation, with over 70% of our firms confirmed that the investment in technology was not only driven by optimizing production cost savings associated with the implementation, but also enhanced productivity and efficiency. Now, not many organizations are using technology as a lever to generate new revenue and growth. And Nick will talk us through a little bit how we can actually do that later. This might be, from our interpretation, mainly because the investment required in adopting new technology for the business needs to justify the high capital investment, need to see some short-term returns. And this has been the focus at the moment in a lot of businesses. 60% of organizations are recognizing transparency as an increasing and highly important factor when considering technology adoption. And this is one of the biggest, biggest opportunity and threat at the same time that we're currently living in. Artificial intelligence seems to be, across the wide range of technology, the next big turning point. And I know that Yojee is doing a lot of work in that area, so I think we'll certainly share some insight on that. And in terms of inhibitor, and we'll go through a bit more details on those, but 40% of the cost is the biggest barrier. And we can analyze that. Nick, why don't you share some of the trends that you've seen from your experience, and why is digitalization so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think digitalization is some, a term that people have been looking at for years, right? There's been a slow progression of it, and the term digitalization has just continually moved, right? As you keep growing or changing your business, the next step of digitalization just is where you're looking for from a future perspective, right? So right now, what we're seeing in technology and even supply chain and logistics more specifically is all of our customers are really looking to gain more visibility. You use the term transparency. So they're looking for more visibility inside of their supply chain end to end. They're looking to make sure that they can be more accountable. They either want accountability from their partners or being more accountable to their customers. And they want this ability to put in more controls in place. Control is so important right now because making snap decisions can impact your gross margin massive percentages. And especially in the market we're sitting in right now, covert world, whether we like it or not, those margins are extremely important, and customers' needs and demands are changing every single day. If you look at some of the shortages that went on from a supply chain perspective around the globe as this pandemic hit, there was gaps, and there's big visibility gaps. You had difficulty holding partners accountable, and you had almost no control over where stuff were or where it was going to be sent to. So really, across those three key entities, visibility, accountability, and control, almost every pain, every issue that we're hearing our customers can be rooted into that problem. Any symptom that they have, any lack of data, lack of control, lack of communication with partners, customers' changes in demands, all of those can go back to visibility, accountability, and control. And one of the major things we've done here in Yojee recently is we've actually steered everything that we're doing to providing more visibility, accountability, and control. Any issue that comes up, we tie it back to that. And so it's so important right now in the space for digitalization, because digitalization in its own essence provides visibility, accountability, and control. Doesn't matter what you're putting in place. If it can help you digitalize something, that's what comes out of it. And so it's an amazing mesh. And that's why I'm really proud of the research that you guys have put together.
Thanks, Nick. Couldn't agree more. I think there are also some legislative requirement, if you think about, data protection regulation, if you think about, some of the acts that different governments have been introducing to monitor supply chain operation as far as, ethical sourcing goes, Modern Slavery Act, California was one of the first state within the US to introduce one. Australia's followed recently, 2018. The UK before that in 2015. So that transparency component is so important, especially when you think about businesses that have a massive number of suppliers. The average business in Australia, and I'm sure in the US will probably be triple that number. The average business in Australia has about 25 suppliers, which for some SMEs is quite a large number. And Australia is also the country with the largest ratio of sole traders to the population, in the world. So when you think about that number and what that means in terms of managing that mass, you do need technology. You need to scale. You need to have the ability to look at data from a different perspective and consolidate that information that you receive and you collect from different data points. So absolutely on point. If we look at some of the motivation for digitalization, our research shows that, again, operational efficiency is it's very much on top. And this is because, again, the need to demonstrate a return on the investment on the short term. But it's also like the performance of existing systems, which is really second on the list, because a lot of organizations are starting to recognize that the business processes and the system they use to manage those processes are no longer fit for purpose in the environment they operate, driven by a number of things, competition, consumer demand, and all sorts of other issues, internal expectation from the business, company reputation. Another metric that was measured in this year's report was the consumer perception of the organization based on the technology that they adopt. Employee productivity, in an environment where the war for talent is already very active, you want to make sure that people are motivated and actually make their job easy. I think we moved past that scare of losing the job because of technology. I think people now embrace change a lot more and see technology as a lever to actually dedicate more of their time to strategic stuff. What are some of the drivers when you engage organization in your space? What comes up as the primary reason for going into a transformation process, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Sometimes I actually think that question, we should really be turning it around to the customers and asking them, because in a lot of cases, we have multiple people in a room. The objective or the expectation or the destination may not be the same. And if you can't make sure that the customer is all aligned in the destination, it's very hard to successfully implement any technology. I don't care what it is, it becomes extremely difficult. But if you are sitting right now with some, and again, we're working with some of the largest global logistics companies in the world. Everybody knows their names. They move billions of dollars worth of products around the world. There is this need to increase operational efficiencies. You're talking about it there. Some of the largest organizations in the world are still using spreadsheets to track some of these things. They may be calling on their own customers to say, hey, we just needed to make sure this was delivered. Can you go confirm it? And I remember sitting there when one of the persons, the project manager, said, "Oh no, we do that all the time." And I said, how do you think that looks within your customer? Your customer is spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases millions of dollars with you. That is your way that you're tracking their goods. The expectation of customers is moving and evolving, and they want stuff now. They want it on demand, and companies have not always kept up. Or some of them have. They've tried to solve one problem with what they think is a pain point, but they're really more solving a symptom of a problem and not getting to the root cause of it. Digitalization can help do that, but there needs to be correctly aligned expectations internally on a customer of what success looks like. And the customers have to be a little bit more open and honest with the vendors on what success looks like. Because if there's misalignment there, you can waste a lot of time, a lot of money, and have a lot of frustration, because you're feeling like you need to keep your cards close to your vest, when really you need to be leaning on the expertise of the partners that you choose to help you reach the objective that you want to achieve. This gets a little different, right? If you're buying a good, if you're buying something on Amazon, Lazada, fill in the blank, you can get a review of it. And again, I don't care if it's toilet paper, I don't care if it's a video, I don't care if it's a video game. You can get information. The key with digitalization and technology being put into a business is no one person, no two companies are exactly the same. You could be integrating to a different OMS, different ERP. You could be taking a TMS system, and just based on users or based on whether it's on-prem or not on-prem, the results are going to be completely different. So the clarity in the destination, I tell customers this all the time, if you can show me where we're going, the destinations you're going to, I can work backwards. I want to know the restaurant, and I want to know the restaurant in Chinatown that you want to go eat at. Don't tell me you want to go west. I want more specifics. And it's our job as industry experts to help drive them to that and help them understand why this path is necessary, because the success on the outcome is what's important. And digitalization can help them get there and bring them the operational efficiencies and drive the cost down that they want, but it really needs to be a collaborative effort.
You made some really good point, Nick. Touched on a concept that we marketeer call as mass customization, i.e. the need for every single business, individual, enterprise to be unique. And that's what it's expected in today's day and age, and it's also reflected in how those technology are implemented, deployed, and adopted. So, a really good point. I think going back to your earlier statement, and putting it back to the business on why you're doing what you're doing, why you're deciding to digitalize your operation, your supply chain. We've seen a bit of a disconnect between the benefit that the organization then realizes as opposed to the motivation they go into. Nobody seems, or very few organizations, I should say, seems to come into a technology transformation program with the expectation to improve agility, to have like real-time capability. But when you look at the benefit, those things are on top of the list, because organizations realize that now the information that would have probably taken them weeks to consolidate because they were on spreadsheet or on pieces of paper or in the office, they are not actually available real time anywhere. And this benefit, even though it wasn't sort of clearly articulated in the going into the transformation stage, is now realizing it's adding a lot of value to business operations. In terms of what the other sort of benefit that we've seen from the report, agility is another critical one. And the agility component of a tech implementation, it seems like, sort of self-explanatory, but it also reflects the agility of changing some processes. So technology should not be the solution, should be a mean to the solution. So that's how some businesses actually reconfigure their processes and their operation to leverage the technology in a much better way. The other important aspect that's become, sort of prominent in our regard is the customer centricity. So a lot of organizations have gone into, again, looking for primary, efficiencies, and then they've started looking at the consumer side. And you've made, some really great observation around the expectation that consumers now have. And that benefit of understanding and putting the customer at the center of your transformation program has helped organization even mitigate some reputational risk, which doesn't seem to be related too much to supply chain, but it's actually one of the biggest challenge that any business in whatever industry or functional area you operate in is actually facing. If you have to sort of describe some of the blockers, some of the inhibitors or the resistance that, from your experience, organizations face while implementing transformation, digital transformation, what would those be?
People don't always anticipate the cost of change internally. I consistently say, if you haven't spoken to a customer, especially large ones, about who's managing the internal change, it's amazing how that thought doesn't go into a lot of decision-making plans. Hey, we're going to put in this new technology and we're just going to roll it out and everybody's going to use it. And a lot of times that's made by decisions made by leaders of companies, not necessarily users of companies. So somebody needs to be looking at, and there needs to be open, honest conversations around the cost of change. Now, you're bringing up something that is important, because cost of change, just by its definition, costs money, time, and it's not easy. Think about anything physically. You want to go get in shape. Like, what are you willing to give up to do that? That same thing goes on in business. You have to be willing to change to get better. And there is a wall of sometimes inefficiencies or decrease in productivity in the business, because you're making a change and people have to get up to speed. So again, when that's managed correctly, rollouts are done better, training's handled better. People who are key users are brought into decision-making processes earlier, so they feel like part of the process versus something being dropped on them. I see that happen way too much, where the key, we could have used them to help implementation go better. We get to that stage and now we need to start, and they got to come up to speed, and there's like, well, why are we doing it this way? We should do it this way. That's not the actual way that we implement stuff. That's not the way it works on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes as sellers, we miss the steps, or we're not allowed access to it. So I think that cost of change is something that's not evaluated completely. I also think that you're bringing up another valid point, and I think there was a question, maybe one of the pre-questions was a little bit around this, was hey, how do you get the leadership to buy into the cost, right? So just take simple math here. You have some solution in place that costs you $1,000 a month, and that's gotten you to be A, wherever you exist today, and it's maybe 50% of where you want to be. And the theory sometimes from the business is, okay, I'm replacing this and it's $1,000 a month. I want a new solution that's going to get me exactly where I want to be, and I want it to cost the same, right? There's just a misaligned expectations of what good looks like and what success looks like. And especially in digitalization, and this is very difficult to monetize, right? Companies are very good, and salespeople tend to be very good about bringing in the qualified pain points, right? These are the things we're trying to objectively fix. Where both sides are bad, the company and a lot of times the sellers, is the quantification of that pain and how bad it can help. Or this is helping one silo, but maybe it's helping finance too. Maybe it's helping sales. Maybe it's helping operations. And you're not able to grab all those areas that you bring value to, and you're not able to share those. And that act of sharing that, first of all, the benefit is spread across the organization. The cost can be spread across the whole organization, and you can get a clearer picture of what success will look like. Instead, if you do it in a silo, and it's done a lot, you do not get the results. You do not get the full benefits of it. You'll hear people talk about technology, right? There's PPT in technology, there's people, process, and technology. Technology does what technology is supposed to do in many cases. Normally, you have a people or a process problem, not a technology problem, right? And when we try to roll stuff out, there's engagement, there's expectations. Those things play a huge role in the way that we roll out successful implementations, and it's necessary. And it has to be, both parties have to understand clearly what restaurant we're going to on Tuesday night, so we make sure we get to the right place. Like, you got to know the destination to be able to work backwards.
Thanks, Nick. You've listed actually a lot of the inhibitors that have come out of our research, from the setup cost to the training cost, the process and the resistance to change, the actual change management process, which I completely agree, it's not to be underestimated. Again, technology does most of the time what technology is supposed to do, is bringing people along. And interestingly, again, another really, really good point you made is the lack of organization-wide integration, which came as a fourth inhibitors from our research, showing that often buying of technology is done in isolation by a particular function, by a particular development, and that's why the results are often not as productive as they hoped in the scoping stage. So CIPS ourselves, we're going through like a huge transformation program at the moment. We're almost replacing every single piece of software we own, and we spent just over 8 months just defining the specification, not on the technology, but on what the user requirements are, what did our customer need, what our employees need, what kind of information we want to extract from using our system. And that's a process that often requires, or always requires, a whole of business approach. You don't do this in isolation. And technology in supply chain is no different, not at all, because your supply chain serves the goals of the organization, and often those dynamics or those strategy don't sync. This is again one of the biggest challenges we see beyond the technology, is the fact that the alignment or the misalignment between the procurement and supply chain function with the rest of the business, often bringing bad name or bad reputation. And that's because this lack of coordination, hence the need for a more cross-functional approach, different skill set as well. This is another important stuff. Obviously to have technology working well, you need people that understand the technology. You have people that are vested in because they feel they've contributed from the very start. They have been part of the process. Their requirements and their expectation have been met as far as what they want to get out of an implementation process, but they've also made the effort to change the way they operate, the way they think, and acquire some of the new skills. Another interesting one, which relates to a question that came in beforehand, is security. So another big issue with a lot of the technology, especially with cloud computing, Internet of Things, and the different touch point that you have with your supplier, with your customer. Is security a big issue? And I'd imagine that the answer will be yes for a lot of organizations that you interact with, Nick. And if so, how do you manage that? How do you reassure? What kind of mechanism, what kind of checkpoint you put in place to ensure that any implementation of supply chain logistics software is meeting the expectation not only of the customer or legislative requirement, but also security of IP, security of business unique propositions. How do you ensure that?
Yeah, I mean, security and cybersecurity as a whole, it's obviously people are seeing more and more and more of it, right? I mean, in America, it started becoming a big deal a couple years ago when everybody was kind of hit or could have been hit by Target being hacked, which is kind of interesting how that actually happened. It came through an HVAC system, right? It wasn't even directly through Target. It came through an HVAC system and then remotely went in there. It's massive, and if you deal like with global companies like we do, you can have GDPR. You can have all these other different informational issues that requirements of different countries and different states. The United States has different policies that other countries don't. Doing business with China and there's a whole tone of requirements that you have to have in place to be able to do that. But even when you look at individual companies, one of the big struggles that we see is they're still trying to determine what their cybersecurity policies are. It can be extremely fluent process where you can be at a point and then a new requirement comes up internally and stuff has to change. What our job is as the people building the technology and putting those things in place is make sure that you're working with the best of the best. We do a lot of work with Amazon and partner with their AWS system to make sure that we are on that cutting edge and trying to be in there where you have the security that's necessary. But like I said, bad guys only got to be right once. We have to be right every time. So you have to have policies in place. You have to have ways to help mitigate if there ever is a situation. And also you have to be aware of what data you're keeping and what data you're not. So in some cases, the data that we keep is very little, right? I mean, it's phone book information for lack of a better term. But with some of the new regulations, even that information is considered highly classified. I've done stuff. We've done projects with different organizations, and whether it's financial or whether it's insurance or medical, some of those requirements they're incredible initially because privacy is so important. But again, you just have to be aware. I think both sides, the sellers and the buyers, need to be very aware on how we're working together. That has to be a two-way street. That has to be open communication both ways. And then also, what are the commitments that our customers will be making to their customers? You also have to understand that. So sometimes one company that we're doing business with makes a commitment to their customers that maybe we aren't aware of. And so again, you just have to have that transparency. You brought up something interesting. I just want to take a step back, and this would be a perfect example of it. When you talk about cross-functional teams and sometimes their inability to implement correctly, is there's not a great way for a bunch of business leaders to come together sometimes and participate in something. Everybody has their opinions. Everybody has their views. I've had many large companies say, we don't do it because it'll slow the project down. Like, okay, well, you're going to go implement it. It's probably not going to be installed correctly, and they're going to complain about it anyways. But when you talk about cybersecurity, the limited amount that people bring them in to really understand what's being communicated and what's being expected is, I'm stunned sometimes at seeing how little communication they have back and forth. But cyber's massive. Anybody who's not paying attention to it and does not have stuff to it is doing themselves a disservice, and they're doing their customers a big disservice.
And risking the reputation of their business very often, because a silly mistake can cause massive consequences. Just following on one thing that you mentioned, Nick, I think the ability to get into the mindset, and some psychologists, behavior psychologists, they sort of position this as the biggest challenge of the time we live in. It's the ability to unlearn and relearn. So whatever we've known about our business, about our operations, even about technology, we need to be flexible. We need to be thinking, okay, this is good now, but it might not be good enough, in 2 years' time. If you think about, some of the technical degrees, looking at computer science, students that go through their bachelor degree, they go to the third year, and what they've studied in year one is already obsolete. So the pace of change is extremely high these days, and we need to be having a constant mindset of readapting, be agile, mentally agile. So Nick, I don't want to sort of like spend too much time blagging now because we've got some great questions. And I want to pick your brain on a couple of other things. Why is digitalization so important? And on the flip side, in terms of, what can businesses achieve by getting this right? And on the flip side, if you don't do it, what are the risks? And I'm just going to make a quote before I hand over to you, or just share a stat. There's only 12% of Fortune 100 companies that were listed in the 1960 listing that are still on the list today. It means 88 of those huge companies back in the 60s, they've all disappeared or moved out of that list. And that, to me, it's a sign that if you don't adapt, if you don't evolve, you're gone.
Yeah. Digitalization, I mean, the act of, and again, this bucket of digitalization is huge. Anything that's it's such a huge bucket, what can fall into it. But basically the way I look at digitalization is you're moving along and leveraging the technology to accomplish an outcome that can be done better, faster, and provide more information to your customer or your team or whatever it is, right? If you're not going to be doing that, so I'll answer the second question first. If you're not doing that, you're risking the ability for your company to continue to grow. You're risking your ability to bring on the best, young, old, doesn't matter, talent to your organization. You're going to be missing your expectation of your customers, and at a point, somebody will show up and they will take your customers from you. Don't worry, I promise you, that will absolutely happen because you're not moving at a rate of change that's meeting either their needs or their customers' needs. If you're doing something in supply chain, you're delivering for a company and their customers are now calling them to get information and you're not providing it back, those customers will go buy from somebody else, right? You have to be willing to deliver on what's necessary. So you can become one of the 88% that's gone and see what that looks like. When you look at companies becoming unicorns and the way they rated at $1 billion market cap, I think it starts in companies after 97. And if you look at what some of those companies are, they're the largest companies in the world right today. So why is it so important? Because it helps you accomplish your goal, do stuff faster, more efficient, more effective. Leverage more, be able to deliver more, be able to promise your customers more, be able to promise your own employees that you'll be able to help them solve real life situations faster. The amount of information that comes in, you have to be able to digest it, right? Digitalization can help you do that. You have to be able to recall and pull things up because we get so much information. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person here that gets hundreds of emails a day. If you don't have that search button in the top of it, it's like, all right, somebody just sent me this thing. And Gio, I actually needed to pull it up yesterday when we were on a call. It was like, all right, well, who sent it? All right, it came from this. All right, I was able to find it and pull it up real quick. If you don't have those, what it does is you lose time, and time is of an essence here. People are looking for things right away, and digitalization helps you deliver that in a timely fashion with the right information so people can make the right business decisions and have control of their world, right? So again, go back to visibility, accountability, and control. You need more visibility in what's going on. You need the systems to be accountable for what they're supposed to do and maybe your employees. And you need to have control to be able to make the decisions fast and maybe change different directions based on new information. That's the world that we live in.
Thanks, Nate. That was quite insightful. I want to move to some of the questions, and I'll start with some of those that have been submitted in the registration process. There's some really good ones, and some that I really love, love your thoughts on. And I know you like this one. How do you position technology value? How do you define a new position technology value? It's they say if you can't measure it, you can't change it, you can't improve it, you can't quantify it. How do you define that? Value
is an interesting thing because my view of value, it's based really on the difference between companies, right? A difference between customers and what their expectations are. But generally speaking, when you look at value, it is an outcome that is has more benefit to a company than a cost it takes to do it, right? So if it allows them to gain more customers, if companies are in a business of going to gather more customers, how does what you're putting in place help them accomplish their main goal? If the company is trying to reduce operating expense but still satisfy their customers, again, how are you doing that? The value, unfortunately, a a lot of people think it's a super static thing, and it's not. Value is fluent amongst the customers that you're working with. And the key in value is being able to have those big boy, big girl conversations in a room and talk about what value is. What is intended outcome? What is expectation and delivery, and align it? Because in some cases, and this happens, and it happens more often, I think, than not, you feel like you deliver something that should meet the value that the customer wants, and the customer's like, I wasn't happy. But again, the value is delivered, but it wasn't as much, or their expectation was we would go from 0 to 60 in 30 days when it should have been 90 days, right? The value on what you're getting out has to be mutually aligned. And so I'm consistently having conversations with customers, is understanding what success looks like in 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is. And again, we start working backwards with the key checkpoints, because I've had customers say what their expectations were of values, and other business leaders in the room from their own company say that we're never going to get there in that time. And so that dialogue internally from them was important, because it aligned expectations on what real value was, and we were able to deliver that successful. Value, although very different amongst companies, has to be an okay conversation to have. And companies should know what they're trying to deliver, and companies should know what they're receiving. So value is a little fluent.
Which brings us on to the next point that closely relates to this one. It's like, how do you measure the return on the investment on technology implementation? I'll let you go first, Nick, and I'll add some thoughts at the end.
ROI is an interesting part, because, right, extremely complex solutions, ROI becomes a little bit more difficult, because you have to be able to quantify other parts of business that you're impacting. And so in a lot of cases, people look at, I'm spending $1,000 right now, you're going to make me spend $1,500. That's a $500 negative ROI. ROI, you have to be able, especially with digitalization things, you have to be able to look inside of an organization and be able to know what key points you're touching and how that brings value, as you used the term earlier, how that brings improvement, operational efficiencies, whatever it is. And the customer normally doesn't know how to quantify some of those things, because they don't make these buys every day. It's not something they buy consistently. So you have to help them understand what you're taking out of that business and talk to those business leaders. We had one just recently that was doing an optimization, and it's a massive organization. They have 4 people for 6 hours a day in the middle of the night, from midnight to 6 a.m. We're doing route planning and optimization for a massive amount of trucks, right? They now do it. It takes 30 minutes. It takes one person 30 minutes to do it every single day, right? Those people didn't leave the business. They're now doing other things, which is more valuable for them. But the ability to be able to quantify that impact in real dollars, help them get something that was viewed as a massive cost to bring in, help them determine their ROI, right? It's also key with the ROI to understand what is really important to the customers. Is it cash flow? Is it different type of things? And if you can have those discussions together, you can help accomplish ROI better, because everybody's looking for an ROI. It's just what is that made up of, which is very vital. So sorry, I don't know where you were going to go with it, but.
No, that's an awesome point, and I can pick up some of those and completely relate to what you're saying. I think there's 2 things for me. One, looking at what's the objective that your business, is aiming to achieve while going through that. So it goes back to the motivation. You can only measure an ROI in comparison to what yourself is, what you set yourselves to achieve. So for organization, again, they go into this kind of transformation with a particular mindset or with specific goals. You have to measure against those goals. Sometimes the motivation for doing something is very different, and you implement the technology and then you start measuring a whole bunch of other things, forgetting about the reason why you implemented the technology in the first place. So if I look at this from a procurement or supply chain manager perspective, look back at the tender specification. You would have put a set of requirements in what you need the technology to do and what you need your supplier to do or behave or deliver, and measure those parameters. You would have asked, particular quality standard, time delivery, price, tracking abilities, all of those things. Don't implement the technology and then go back and start measuring other things. And I completely agree with the last point that I wanted to make with some of the intangible, metrics that often business don't measure. So you mentioned the time that people spent, redoing a process after technology was implemented. think about the employee well-being, the efficiency, remove all the frustration. And I can speak for myself. We're using a very antiquated CRM system, which takes us ages every time we need to update a customer record. And that's not efficient. This is time that we could be using chasing another customer. So removing that, that's very hard to quantify. However, those are things that make massive difference in organization performance, because, happy employee are performing employee. So start thinking about metrics that go well beyond, things that are currently measured. I'm not saying don't measure, because that would be, sort of like a bit of a idiosyncrasy, but, start measuring things that are beyond that, that particular technology in itself.
Pay attention. What you're saying there, it's paying attention to the margins. The winning happens in the margins. There's people who've written books on it. Moneyball is one from a baseball perspective where they look at it. You can win in the margins, and there's a lot of stuff that can be done within there. And that's where it is so important to be able to have those open conversations with customers, to be able to look at very specific things that nobody may be looking at. And that's where there's a lot of waste. Everybody can fix the big thing, right? Everybody can ship a package. Everybody can do that stuff. It's some of those little things that you're spending a little bit more time on, that if that cost gets driven down, in many cases, that's a lot of profitability that can be put back into the company.
Like a question very specific to Yojee. What's your USP? What makes you different? And there were a few that, relating to that in the lead up to the event. How can you help business differently than any other SaaS provider could?
Yeah, I mean, Yojee's USP, it was a little bit of an evolving message when I joined, and I can tell you that I believe that, why Yojee exists is we help companies solve their most complex supply chain problems. Now, I've sat there and I've said that to some big corporations. I've spoken to some people, and just that first sentence, and they say, oh, okay, that's very vague. And I said, we're helping some of the last mile deliveries for the largest e-commerce company in the world. There's a massive complexities that are necessary there, and the country that we're doing it is challenging in some cases to get set up and get them going. So that's very complex. They have a very specific complex needs for them. But also right now we're working with a car wash company that during COVID is trying to stay in business and different types of things. And they have some very specific logistics and supply chain problems that they need help with, and we're helping them too. So again, Yojee helps solve those most complex supply chain problems. How do we do it? We do it by helping provide more visibility, accountability, and control through a company's supply chain. Again, what is necessary for them is different. What visibility means to a top 3 freight forwarding organization in the world is very different than the Australian car wash facility. And we just happen to do it through very agile, you were using the term, very agile technology that allows for growth. It doesn't put people into boxes, and works again in services or all the way up to the largest logistics companies in the world. They all have needs. What I think is very funny is people think that just because companies are really big, they have it all together. I've sat in the room with some of the biggest companies. I've sat on panels with people from AT&T and SAP and groups like that. And I can tell you without a doubt, largest companies in the world have just as many problems as smaller ones. They just can hide them sometimes a little bit better. And so I don't know if that's what we kind of state our USP in.
Awesome. And Tom's asking from the audience, is Yojee software someone that the end user has, or is the freight forwarders, the providers in chain that use it?
Sure. So it shares information with the end user, right? So you're giving real-time visibility to where packages are. Again, if you're looking at that segment of it, right? Helping couriers or major companies allow couriers to do last mile deliveries for them. You're providing that visibility through, so somebody's not like, oh, where's my package? Is it going to get here? You look at APAC as a whole. There's a lot of deliveries aren't done by the FedExes of the world, the DHLs of the world. They're not done by that. They're done by couriers and smaller companies. So it gives some to both, but it's mostly obviously used for the larger companies to provide that data to their consumers. But again, courier companies and last mile providers, trucking companies, absolutely, it gives them the visibility, and then it gives the retailer or the large organization their visibility also.
Awesome. We've got another question from Philip, coming from an angle of the bad reputation that some of those technology implementation processes have in the procurement supply chain world. He's asking, often the benefit are portrayed through business cases. However, with constrained internal politics, poor change management, change in scope throughout the process, what can supply chain managers and procurement managers do when the business review comes to ensure that the post-implementation realizes the benefit that they've promised? And there's a second part to it, and is asking why the original benefit are not delivered, and if so, should business case represent an array, a spread of potential benefit as opposed to this is what we're going to deliver? And what might be some of the causes? Is it poor governance? Is it strategy? We've touched on some of the challenges. What's in your view the main?
When you tend to have unsuccessful implementation, there's a misaligned expectation at some point. Again, let's assume that what was sold was good. Let's assume everybody inherently is trying to deliver a product that's good. Let's take all negativity out of it, but let's assume in a perfect world, both sides came into the relationship under the right prefix, the right pretenses, and hey, we're going to fix this problem. Things that happen is misalignment on the destination, what good looks like, what success looks like. Scope creep, because if you do not bring parties involved early enough, at some point they're going to get involved and they're going to want things. Oh, I want the report to do this. Oh, we needed to fill into our finance group. We needed to push over there. We're bringing on this new group from an API, and that's going to be our main delivery partner. Literally had a conversation yesterday about one that had a massive scope creep to basically completely change the way the implementation goes, where they wanted to, for whatever reason, they wanted to use an Excel file to upload data. Perfect. If that's what you want to do, you want it to come directly out of your current system, you want to manage it real quick in an Excel file, okay, we'll upload an Excel file if that's what you want. 2 weeks after going through the implementation process, they came in and they said, no, you know what, we want to use an API connection. By the way, we still need everything to be live at this period of time. And there was a juggling to make sure that you got it aligned. And again, so that you have those missed expectations. To the next point of how to review, you better be communicating throughout that whole process, because sometimes you have the issue of not communicating enough, and somebody shows up and is like, we did it. And they're like, no, that's not what we wanted. Rather, the communication and the checkpoints have to be super efficient and super communicative through the process. There has to be weekly checkups. In some cases, daily checkups. We did a go live during a campaign period, which is the customer's largest time to go live. We had morning stand-ups and evening stand-ups. We did meetings on Saturday. You had people around the globe trying to get this thing together. You know, groups in Germany, groups in the APAC, groups in the US, everybody working together. You have to put together a plan so that it is done successfully. And if you are committed to implementing change, you have to take the time to implement the change. And that sometimes is a struggle. And I would tell you, most of them that fail, there's not a good plan of action on how it's going to be rolled out. It's like, hey, we chose a vendor, life's done. And I can tell you that you will be regretting your implementation, and it may not 100% be the solution's fault.
Nick, one question coming from Aplosi. He's asking for some advice on how we portray this to management, how we use particular language, and that sort of like pivoted around the common interchangeability or use of words like automation, technology, digitalization. How do we ensure that we speak the right language to people that might not have that technical expertise? How do we sell this?
Remove the technical expertise. Okay, so I will tell you, I consider myself to know quite a bit on the technology. When I get some of the technology group people from our largest customers and even our internal people, and they're having conversations, I'm like, guys, let's stop. Let's break it down. What is the outcome that we're looking to accomplish? So when you're dealing with internal leadership and you're dealing with internal customers that may not be tech related, do not dive into the tech. Do not use buzzwords. Instead, like you're having a conversation with somebody at a bar, right? What does success look like? Understand what their vision is and where they're trying to get to. relate what you're putting in place to help them accomplish their goal. If they cannot relate and correlate what you're delivering to helping them accomplish their goal, I promise you they're on to the next thing that's going to help them accomplish that. People are good. Inherently, I believe people are good, but people, there is an act of selfishness in what we're doing. If what I'm listening to isn't going to benefit me, it may not be 100% of my attention. You have to draw things back to help them accomplish their goals. Now, if you're talking about internally in a company, putting in the solution will help them accomplish their goal, which will help the company get to their part. You just have to understand what they're being tasked with. What are their KPIs? What are those things that they're looking to do? And that is so, so important, and does take some open, honest communication. Hey, XYZ executive, I need your help. Here's what I'm working on. I know this is going to benefit our organization this way. I need to understand some of the challenges that you're having right now with finance as it relates to supply chain. And so I can try to start correlating what we're putting in place and aligning it with your goals. So when we present it to yourself and to the rest of the team, that we make sure that your needs are being met. Those conversations, they're not BS, man. They're just people sitting around talking. And it's so important to do that. I think that you'll see some great results if you can do that.
Awesome, and that's really good advice. I mean, speaking the business language, you know, if I could paraphrase what you mentioned, it's highly important. I mean, the profession that we work in, it's often characterized by, you know, acronyms, you know, like 3-letter words and jargons. You know, just understand, just go back to the, you know, the core business purpose. What are you trying to achieve, and sell that as a reason for doing it. Nick, that's been like an awesome session. You know, we've got 2 minutes to go, and I don't want to squeeze in any more questions, because that would be silly. But do you want to leave us with, you know, some final thoughts, some final consideration? You know, what would be your advice, you know, for organizations that are considering this or are going through this? Do you have any top 3 advice or something along those lines?
Yeah, well, first thing, anybody who took the time to ask a question, if we can get the questions, we'll work on getting them back to you, because I think it's important. I think if you guys took the time to be here and ask the questions, we should do the respect and get you guys the answers. But further, if you're out there and you're trying to implement solutions, technology related in the supply chain, try to we're trying to actually accomplish, not what you're trying to implement, but what you're trying to get out of the implementation. What, again, does success look like for you? And map it out, because your goals and your wants, when you say them out loud, is what you want in 6 months. Maybe you're going to look back and go, that's probably not going to happen. But if you lay out 6, 12, 18 months and you start working backwards, it will help your partners understand where you're going. Again, the way this is going to work is we're going to start being a little bit more open and honest with our partners that are there to help us deliver what we're looking for. It's a crazy thing that we sit there and we assume people know the best way to deliver what it is that we're looking for. And I can tell you, there are so many times that somebody's done an implementation for you that they thought they knocked it out of the park and you were unhappy. And so whose fault is it? Right? And so if you didn't clearly lay out expectations and have them clearly defined, and both sides saying this is what we're looking for, the great thing about expectation is you can have expectations on them. Just be aware they may have then expectations on you. And so please just work together on it, because you will get so much further. We'll stop hearing these horror stories about terrible salespeople and terrible companies to work with and all those type of things. Rather, let's just get a little bit more aligned. I love chatting about this stuff. So even if it has nothing to do with me, I think that they'll probably share my information. I'm more than welcome, more than happy to talk to you guys through this stuff. And even give you some guidance. And if you're saying, hey, we're running into this problem, I mean, if Gio has anybody that needs help, I will absolutely take the time to communicate with you. And I mean, I think that the only way it's going to get good is that if we all start working a little bit together and sharing some best practices. So that's just a little bit of ideas from our standpoint, and hopefully it helped.
Brilliant. Nick, I want to thank you so much. I'm going to add one last thing, as I might have made reference at the start. Technology is not a solution. Digital technologies are means to a solution. So don't forget your people while you go through this process. Get the buy-in. Ensure you invest in listening their concern, understanding where their pain points are, and leverage technology to ease some of those things. So if you get, again, committed people, if you get people that are happy with, you know, how the technology has been onboarded, implemented, and what it delivers, you know, the transformation should be a little bit less painful. So don't forget the paper list message. Nick, again, on behalf of CIPS and our community, I'd like to thank you and Yojee for this amazing session. I've certainly learned a lot. I've taken a huge amount of notes. It's been insightful, and I really appreciate your availability in, in making yourself available out there to, to answer some of the questions that haven't been answered live, and chat to our community about some of their pain points. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And look forward to doing this again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone in attendance. I hope you have an enjoyable rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Just a quick note, just take a bit of time to do the survey. It's always important to give us feedback so we can improve what we do next. Thank you very much.